the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
I'm going to tell you a particularly fascinating story. It's not somewhat obscure. It's the story of the greatest rivalry in U.S. women's gymnastics. See what I mean by obscure? How often do we pay attention to women's gymnastics? Except maybe once every 4 years when we get to the Olympics. But the facts of this story are these. That in the 1980s and 90s, the University of Alabama women's gymnastics team won an amazing 6 national titles, 8 Southeastern Conference titles, and an NCAA best 29 regional titles. And during that very same era, in the same conference, schools a little more than 200 miles apart, at the University of Georgia, they won an unbelievable 10 national titles, 16 Southeastern Conference titles, and 22 regional titles. Now, those are the facts, but the facts and statistics only tell us one part of the story. It's history. It's history that tells us how those facts came to be. See, history is more than a compilation of past events. History attempts to tell the how and the why of the events as they unfold as they do. History tries to articulate the significance of seemingly random events. So then, we rely on history to tell us the story of Suzanne and Sarah. They were the coaches at these respective institutions. That would be Sarah Patterson and Suzanne Yoculin. They both started at their schools in the very same year, and they took over programs that were on the very brink of extinction. You know the Southeastern Conference, it's all about football. Who ever paid any attention to women's gymnastics? But they made people pay attention. And the personalities were so drastically different, but they had the same success through tenacity, through hard work, through desire, through love of the girls, and love of sport. They achieved success that has been completely unparalleled before. Now, that's a story of great success, and history helps tell that story. Now, let me tell you a story of a near disaster, and how history can help us understand that, and how God works through our successes and our disasters. And so, history will help us explain this. This story that I'm about to tell you, which you're a part of, actually comes in 2 parts, but it's really one and the same story. We heard the beginning, or we should have heard the beginning of this story last week before we got that ridiculous amount of snow. That's the first part 1 we would have heard last week in God. Part 1 of the story goes like this. Jesus goes to his hometown of Nazareth. And in part 2, we hear today, Jesus is assaulted, he is run out of town, and he is nearly killed. Almost a disastrous end to that story. Let's go back. The story begins like this. Jesus goes to his hometown, Nazareth, a place where he grew up, a place where people know him, and he goes to the synagogue, as is his custom. And while he was there, he was the one who was invited to read the Scriptures. So he's handed the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. That's how the Scriptures were stored, in scrolls. And so Jesus handed the scroll, he opened it up, he unrolled it to the portion where he wanted to read. And he reads from the prophet Isaiah. And the prophet Isaiah says this, God's Spirit is upon me, to proclaim the message of good news to the poor. He has sent me to announce pardon to prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the burdened and the battered free, to announce that this is God's year to act. What is it then that becomes so infuriating to the people of Nazareth? Well, it is this. Jesus rolls up the scroll, hands it back to the attendant, and then sits down. Being seated is the proper posture for a respected teacher. He sits down and he says, Today, you have just heard Scripture make history. It comes true now in this place. Well, the first reaction of the people in the synagogue that day was really kind of delight and astonishment. But then we get to part 2 of our story. They say, hey, wait a minute. We know this guy, right? He's just a carpenter. He's just the son of Joseph. Where does he get off? Who does he think he is? And all of a sudden, Jesus goes from a hometown boy that makes good to an upstart that's very much in need of a smacking. That's exactly what they try to do. But to his credit, now, Jesus doesn't back down from this confrontation at all. Rather, it's like he pours gas on a fire, existing fire. And so, what Jesus is saying is that this good news goes beyond your religion. And this good news goes beyond this people. So he tells 2 stories that are guaranteed to get him in trouble, and it works fabulously. It angers them all more. Now here's where history is going to help explain the events of the story that Jesus is telling. Jesus says, what do you think God was up to? What do you think God was up to, my dear friend? Back in the days of Elijah. Now Elijah is considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, prophets in all of Israel. Well, Elijah was sent by God to stay with a starving woman during the famine. And by the miracle of grace, their food, the meal that they had in the jar, with Elijah's presence there, never ran out. And Jesus points out, she isn't one of us. She's not one of us. Elijah, the great prophet of Israel, was sent to a foreigner. What about in the days of Elijah? Lots of folks in Israel suffered from that dreaded skin disease of leprosy. And God sent Elijah, or actually sent Naaman the Syrian, to see Elijah. And Naaman the Syrian was healed. Now get this. Naaman the Syrian is not just a foreigner. He was the commander of the enemy army. And that army's mission was to destroy Israel. And he was the one who was healed. And not for the last, as Jesus tells these stories, not for the last time. But people tried to kill Jesus for what he said and for what he does. Now, if the good people of Nazareth hate what they hear from Jesus, you need to be prepared to dislike what you're going to hear today. Let me tell you the story of one of our homes. This is South African Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu. When he was speaking at Calvary Episcopal Church in Pittsburgh, he said, he was talking to the people gathered that day, he said, can you imagine that there are those who think that God is a Christian? Can you tell me what God was before he was a Christian? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Jesus is telling the people in Nazareth, he says, your God is not just Jewish, and you are not the only chosen people. And so, obviously you can see the words of Jesus do not win friends, and certainly they don't influence those people. Think about what took place in Seneca Falls in 1848, Seneca Falls, New York, when women gathered to demand the right to vote, a right that would not be granted to them until the 1920s. Or in Selma, Alabama, in the early 60s, when Martin Luther King led a march to the Capitol of Montgomery to demand an end to voting discrimination. Well, what happened in Stonewall Inn in New York, which marks the beginning of the current gay rights liberation movement. All of that, and everything like that, it got its start in Nazareth. See, Jesus' words are alarming illustrations of God's universal love, acceptance, and inclusion. Sometimes even good people try to make religion too exclusive. And when we do become exclusive, we must be shaken out of that foggy way of thinking. How can we exclude in the name of God when we barely know God? You heard what Paul says. We only see God partially now. So how can we exclude when we barely know God? A God whose ways are not our ways, and whose thoughts are not our thoughts. The quote from Isaiah once again. See, I think that most of the time, without thinking, most human beings are content to settle for a God who is too small. Or rather, we try to make God too small, or too much like us. a God who conveniently conforms to our life and our belief and our way of thinking. Well, I'm here to tell you that God is much, much too big for that. God is much too wild, and I think much too dangerous. And all along, Jesus said, let me show you about that God. Let me tell you about that God. So the God of Jesus is just too free, too wide, too expansive, too inclusive, and too much without boundaries for the people in Nazareth that day. And maybe sometimes it's like that for us too. Ours is a God who cannot be completely captured in Scripture or tradition, completely captured in any other way. God will always be more than that. Never let it be said that your God is too small. Let us say, and more importantly, let us show, as Jesus does, that God is just too big for the human mind. And it is that God, Jesus said, that intends to capture every human heart. Everyone. History begins today. In God's name. Amen.